Story 1. The job as a waitress really isn't that bad. I haven't had many bad jobs, but that one was the worst I've experienced. It required me to be constantly cheerful and a bit flirtatious, which was tricky for someone socially awkward. Story 2. Corporate consultant. Made money, lost humanity. Had to pretend to care about collaboration and innovative challenges for 8 hours a day. Still have post-traumatic stress disorder from all the tasks and easy opportunities. Story 3. I worked in a steel factory for a while I was between jobs in my technology field. The hours were unpleasant, the manager was difficult, the owner was difficult, and the work itself was dirty and exhausting. However, the starting pay was quite good for my area, and they offered uncapped overtime. Story 4. Bartender in a tropical tourist destination. It was like having an island of intoxicated, slightly creepy uncles eager to press $100 bills into my hands. Story 5. Corporate lawyer. I averaged over 80 hours a week for a full year and took 4 weeks of vacation. By the end, I had lost touch with reality. I once went to the office on a Tuesday and came home on Saturday morning. The pay was incredible for someone with so little experience, but it was not variable. My salary remained the same regardless of how much I worked. I made over $400,000 in my third year out of law school, and this was a decade ago. Story 6. Corrections. 12-hour shifts, sometimes mandated to stay multiple days in a row. Manipulation by both staff and inmates. Intimidation from inmates. Violence and constant arguing. Many people can tolerate it, but I believe I have autism, which remains undiagnosed, and it just wasn't the right environment for me. I was paid $35 per hour, with overtime at 1.5 times the rate. If I came in on a day off, the overtime rate was double, equating to $70 per hour. The pay was good, but the environment was very challenging. Story 7. Food manufacturing, specifically Kellogg's and Cheez-It crackers, is an example of a large company that has minimal control over individual factories. Instead of a typical corporate structure, each factory often operates under a small, independent leader. The sanitation manager canceled ongoing projects to implement daily cleaning routines that were more about appearance than effectiveness, with employees merely sweeping the floor to give the illusion of cleanliness. If you eat cheese, you may want to reconsider. Story 8. Scraping barnacles off the bottoms of boats made me realize how weak my arms were when I tried to hold a pressure washer wand over my head for 8 hours. Messy, smelly, wet, and hot describe both barnacle busters and certain anatomical parts of pole dancers. On a positive note, it paid well. Story 9. Being a call center representative in a credit repair job felt like I was working on a suicide helpline every day due to the mental stress involved. Story 10. Any commercial driver's license-based delivery job I have ever worked had decent pay, but the workplace atmosphere was often disturbing. Most commercial drivers in this area are typically older white men with openly racist attitudes, or the places we delivered to were horrifying in their own right. I really need to stop doing this to myself. Story 11. Working at Lowe's. The predatory and uncomfortable customer service methods they wanted us to use were bizarre and counterintuitive. However, I did earn around $20 an hour for essentially just standing around a section of the store all day. You should look into what Lowe's corporate says we are supposed to do with customers. It's unreasonable and would drive away nearly every single customer if any of us actually followed those guidelines. Aside from the clear prejudice and disdain they have toward non-commercial workers and civilian purchasers, the most outrageous expectation is that we are supposed to pace around and, anytime we pass a customer, including when we are walking to another section or on a break, we must stop and engage them in a conversation about their purchase and encourage them to buy additional items related to that purchase. They want us to act like a video game non-player character. You are not even supposed to do this just once. If you pass the same customer again, you must engage in the same conversation each time. This means that if you are pacing around your section and pass the same person 5 times, you are technically expected to have 5 conversations with him about basically the same topic. Obviously, nobody adhered to this until we eventually got a new store manager who wanted to conform to corporate's demands and fired me for not following those unreasonable expectations. Story 12. Coal miner and oil rig roughneck. Both are absolutely miserable, but if I had to do it again, I would choose rigging. Story 13. Dairy Factory. The pay was good, but the place was unionized. I had to work all the overtime and nights. I have never worked a union job since then. Story 14. During the recession, I worked in customer support for AT&T Mobile at a call center. It was a challenging experience. However, it paid relatively well at $10 per hour, and it was a job that you could leave at work. It required little mental effort outside of the office, which was nice. They also provided 8 weeks of training, so I was paid $10 an hour for just sitting in a classroom during that time. Story 15. Directional drilling on oil rigs was dull. It wasn't so bad when I had a 3-week on and off schedule, but it was still difficult being away from home. Then I lost my schedule and only got home during casing breaks, which was miserable. Story 16. D&K Frozen Foods in Walla Walla in the late 1980s. Standing at a 15-foot-long conveyor belt while 3 inches of peas rushed by, I was told to find the bad pea for 12 hours a day, but I made $7 an hour plus overtime. As a teenager in the 1980s, that was nearly a bar of gold for me. Story 17. Repo Man. Honestly, it's just a sad job. Nobody likes you. You see people at their worst. It's dangerous. You have to work long hours because it's usually a commission-based job. If you don't get any cars, you don't get paid. But if you work hard, you can make good money. It will drain your soul, though. Story 18. Corporate audiovisual. Everyone is in constant competition to be the loudest expert in the room while also dealing with clients who are absolutely certain they are better than you. Story 19. Call center for upset customers. Paid like a CEO, but felt like I was being held hostage by poor Wi-Fi and worse attitudes. Story 20. Labor. Straight out of high school and making $25 an hour in 1998. The paycheck was nice, but carrying around pages of concrete was not. Story 21. I worked for a corrupt public organization. I was paid well but also experienced significant abuse. It was a total loss. Never again. Story 22. I can't say I've ever had a job that paid well. My least favorite job was stacking 50-pound fertilizer bags in Florida. They come by every 2 or 3 seconds. Sometimes the seamer doesn't work properly on a bag, and it spills all over the floor and you walk in it. I did that job for 4 hours and then just walked away. Story 23. Selling extended car warranties was a challenging job despite the good pay. We sold to individuals from all walks of life, which made it difficult to convince them to make a purchase. Story 24. All of them were unprofessional and refused to pay anything above minimum wage. They ensured there was never a situation where I was paid more than that. There was no overtime or holiday pay. Additionally, if I didn't count my hours, there would always be errors that conveniently shorted my pay by $50 to $100 every paycheck. It seems everything is run by dishonest individuals, and the law enforces it. Story 25. Sales manager in the Mid-Atlantic region. Good salary, company car, low effort, and largely unsupervised. I hated every minute of it. I quit and changed careers completely. As far as work goes, this was the single greatest decision of my life. Story 26. I worked as a portable restroom cleaner at music festivals, earning $42 per hour plus overtime. I encountered many surprising items, including drugs, phones, wallets, and even an entire wedding dress. I quit after 6 months when someone painted the walls with a substance that was quite unsettling. Story 27. Working in the warehouse of a shipping company was a part-time job I had in high school, earning $17 per hour during 2014 and 2015. Throughout December, we were guaranteed overtime, and once official winter break arrived, I worked 2 weeks with over 50 hours each week. Earning $25 per hour as a high school student in 2014 and 2015 felt excessive. At times, it seemed like I was taking advantage of the system. I even bought my first PC with my earnings. However, that job was incredibly demanding. It was like doing a light workout for 10 hours straight. Story 28. Software analyst. It was the most boring job I ever had. The pay and benefits were amazing, and my coworkers were wonderful. I lasted 5 years before I just couldn't continue. Story 29. Death claim intake for fixed and variable indexed annuities. I had to talk to people whose loved ones had just died. They thought they could simply report the death and receive a substantial amount of money in a few days. I explained to them that there is no lump sum value and that if they provided all of the required documentation, they could receive a small stream of income in a few months instead. The distress from callers was almost constant, and it was quite rare for someone to be happy that their loved one had that type of policy. Story 30. The demolition of air conditioner ductwork in old buildings was a dirty and dusty job due to years of dirt accumulation, which was quite unpleasant. The only upside was that it paid well. Story 31. I have never experienced or heard of such a thing. However, in the 1980s, I had a college friend who earned $20 per hour cleaning an adult theater. He disliked it. Story 32. I worked as a laborer at the Wonder Bread factory during one summer in college. I earned just over $10,000 because I was forced to work 80-hour weeks for 2.5 months. I lost 30 pounds and had money, but it was a terrible experience. Story 33. Security officer during COVID. Telling adults to wear a mask was frustrating, but the hourly rate plus hazard pay was excellent. Story 34. Working at a company focused on athletes can be challenging due to constant turnover among managers and employees. I am planning to leave and move forward without looking back. Story 35. I worked in a warehouse freezer for about 6 months. The cold temperature of -20 degrees Celsius was unpleasant, but the isolation and constant humming of the fans could drive anyone insane. There was just enough work for one person to be employed full-time, so I rarely received help or company. It was just me, alone in the cold, with the constant noise of the fans. It was mentally taxing, but the pay was very good, and I received extra mandated breaks along with a bonus for every hour spent there. Story 36. Working at the A&P bakery was a mixed experience. The pay was great, but the hours were not ideal. A good way to save money is to be too tired to go out and spend it. That summarizes the A&P bakery experience. Story 37. I worked for my local blood center, where my job was to monitor the inventory of our center and the hospitals in the surrounding areas under our contract. I shipped blood to those that were low and often delivered it myself. I was also responsible for blood irradiation and washing. I frequently worked overtime because I was always on call. If I made an error, it could seriously impact someone's health, delay their treatment, or even lead to death in severe cases. It was stressful, but I earned twice as much as in any other job I had. Story 38. Chicken farming, broiler house. We had 3 houses. The income was $70,000 every 4 months. It is a full-time job with significant maintenance costs. A dead motor costs $200. Story 39. At the time, I believed the pay was very good, and it ultimately helped me buy my house. However, working in the wireless telecommunications industry required me to be on rooftops and cell towers, constantly lugging heavy equipment and steel to mount it. The expectations from the office were always increasing, and even when you performed well, they could not simply say good job. Instead, they criticized you because they believed that was the way to improve for next time. Now, I earn significantly more while working less, and I only work seasonally. Story 40. Many years ago, I worked as a garbage collector during summer and holiday breaks in high school. We always said our pay was roughly double the prevailing wage for high school students, plus we had unlimited food. Story 41. I never made much, but for about 4 months last year, I worked in a small warehouse that resold used phones. They paid minimum wage, which was more than I made in my last job. I didn't care for the company, but their behavior was both pathetic and amusing to me since they were so bad at being mean. A lady jokingly told me, "You'll be signing your life away," when I was filling out the final documents for my employment there. The main supervisor would get very upset if someone spoke any language other than English. That same supervisor did not understand personal space. He would touch or hug people and call them strange pet names. Since the pay was minimum, so was my effort. They didn't like that, so they would talk behind my back and have others bully me into doing better at work. The rumors and gossip amounted to, "Look, he's so tired. Does he need a pillow? 5. They were incompetent with direct orders, so when I asked for clarification, they thought I was an idiot. I assure you I was the smartest person there, apart from a couple of decent individuals. Story 42. I worked in the administration of a state university, earning $131,000 a year. It was good money, but I felt miserable in a cumbersome bureaucracy, stuck in an asbestos-filled, moldy old office. I was surrounded by people who were afraid to take any action for fear of attracting the ire of influential figures and major donors. Story 43. Not even close. I was working in a foundry, casting aluminum, beryllium alloys, and bronze. If you know anything about the health effects of beryllium and bronze, you understand what a terrible place this was. There were some old-timers there, and they were coughing up blood daily. They knew they didn't have long to live, but they were getting paid well. I was a pourer and a molder, earning $10 per hour in 1979. One day, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration came for a surprise inspection. They furloughed us for 2 weeks while they installed fume scrubbers and vents over the smelting pots. They begged us to come back. Story 44. I sold health and life insurance 8 years ago. I wasn't even that good at it, yet I made around $96,000 in my best year. Additionally, I received residuals for a year after I left. It has probably changed a lot since then. Story 45. Not an official job, but I would earn money on the side in Second Life. It was fairly demeaning, but I made about $25 to $100 per hour. Story 46. I worked an evening tech support job at a college, getting paid to sit for 3 hours, 5 days a week. One professor used the service the entire time I held the job. Essentially, I was paid to do homework, look professional, and sound caring if the phone rang. This opportunity arose when an evening class professor had a projector bulb blow, forcing him to cancel class due to the lack of someone to change it. Another professor struggled to connect their laptop to the presentation system and faced the same problem. A third professor accidentally locked themselves out of a smart key classroom. Together, they presented a convincing case for after-hours support. Although the position was fully funded, it lacked proper integration and support. The campus IT services never recognized the role or provided any capability beyond the basics of troubleshooting, such as checking if devices were on, connected, or rebooted. These systems were secured in locked cabinets and required campus IT services for access if issues arose. The one professor who utilized the service called because the projector bulb had blown. Unfortunately, that issue must be handled by campus IT services between 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. I had no ladder or access to one, no replacement bulbs, and no way to access the presentation system cabinets. I also lacked a key to unlock a locked door and had no means to reset any passwords or access systems. In total, I made $3,000 and the professor was very grateful. Story 47. Terrazzo decking on Navy ships is challenging work, but it is piecework. If you are efficient and skilled, you can earn over $1,000 a day. Story 48. I worked as a stage manager for a professional dinner theater. The management was poor, but the pay was excellent. I didn't quit until one of my bosses told me I couldn't visit my dying grandfather because the show must go on, and insisted I needed to get my priorities straight. I quit on the spot, informing him that my priorities were, in fact, straight. Story 49. Service plumbing involves a lot of overtime without holidays, working weekends and evenings, which was challenging. Not knowing the situation I was entering often caused me anxiety. It was difficult to provide customers with a price, knowing the costs and seeing them decide between fixing the plumbing or sacrificing necessities like food to afford it. I quit after 6 months but earned nearly as much in that time as I did in an entire year at my next job. Story 50. Service manager for an 18-wheeler dealership. Drivers walk in thinking you broke their truck on purpose and that you are about to take advantage of them. I understand dealerships have a bad reputation and many do take advantage of people, but you would think they could at least give someone a chance before coming out swinging. I was making a little over $125,000 per year as a service manager. I quit after 2 years because I was miserable. I now work in information technology from home, making about $45,000 per year. 1/3 the money, but 3 times the happiness. Story 51. Cleaning out stores that have been closed down, stripping them of everything but the copper and plumbing. Base pay was $1,000 per week, cash under the table. On top of that, we received $35 for meals each day. We could sleep in the store to save money, or the boss would put us up in a motel, but you had to share with another crew member, if that wasn't an option. If we finished the job early, we received a bonus of $500 for each day saved. Finishing a job 3 days early earned us a bonus of $1,500. Additionally, the boss would routinely treat us to dinner, beyond the meal money, and trips to theaters, aquariums, amusement parks, and more once the job was over. Anything left in the store, fixtures, merchandise, equipment, we could divide if we couldn't sell it off. It was very hard work, though. We'd start at 5 or 6 a.m. and not stop until 8 or 9 at night, and it was all physical labor. The contract did not allow for heating or air conditioning, so we worked in the hot, humid Florida heat or the freezing cold Minnesota winters. Story 52. Cold calling was not sustainable for long due to its draining nature for individuals without a Type A personality, but the commissions were quite good. Story 53. I worked for Arvin Meritor in my small rural hometown during my first summer of college. They manufactured automotive parts, primarily exhaust components, including those for the new Corvettes and most GMC and Chevy trucks. The factory interior was cooled by approximately 200 large fans that only contributed to turning the place into a giant convection oven. I managed to get a day shift, which meant working on the line at 5:30 a.m., with one 15-minute break before and after a 30-minute lunch. It was miserable, but at the time around 2004, the $11.34 per hour was significant for a college student. The longtime employees advised us college students to learn from the experience so we wouldn't end up in the same position, encouraging us to pursue smarter and better opportunities. There were many good people there, but I definitely don't miss it. Story 54. Car sales specialized in bad credit involve long hours, typically 60 to 90 a week, with a brutal pace and numerous substance-related problems. In a team of 4 successful car salesmen, 2 may be using drugs and 1 may be dealing. You often encounter people in desperate situations, and there is a tendency to exploit them for profit. It can be soul-crushing, especially if you are one of the participants. I worked in this environment for 8 years, and it changes you. Although I averaged $90,000 a year, I now engage in a much calmer profession that offers similar earnings. This transition also required me to obtain my degree, along with experiencing a few very lean years in between. Story 55. Private practice legal assisting is very different from corporate legal assisting. Corporate environments have human resources policies that aim to reduce employee turnover by creating a positive workplace atmosphere. This includes team building and career progression opportunities. In private practice, the situation is quite different. Human resources often consists of only one individual trying to prevent staff from leaving, while also managing demanding lawyers who are effective yet challenging to retain. The dynamics can vary significantly even within the same office. For example, one might say, "Oh, you're on Phil's team? He's great. He knows how to delegate and is a real collaborator." In contrast, someone might comment, "That's the new clerk for Brandon. I give him 2 days before he's gone." Story 56. Luxury wedding planner. I earned $175,000 a year but dealt with the most entitled brides imaginable. One bride even threw a crystal vase at me because the shade of white roses was too ivory. I quit after 2 years for my sanity, despite the excellent pay. Story 57. I took a large pay increase from a previous job to work in the financial services department for one of the largest insurance brokers in the world. My life was negatively impacted as a result. I learned a significant lesson about what I am willing to sacrifice for a higher salary. It wasn't worth it at all. During my second interview, I was told that being great isn't good enough. I should have walked out then and there. Eventually, I took a pay cut to work in a different industry, and the increase in happiness was invaluable. Story 58. While in college in the early 1990s, I had a job working evenings and nights at an egg packing plant. loading cases of eggs onto a truck for delivery to New York and New Jersey supermarkets. The work was physically demanding, and not being able to see my girlfriend, who is now my wife, consistently was disappointing. However, earning $13 an hour, which was triple the minimum wage, along with 20 to 30 hours of overtime each week, was a significant benefit. Story 59. I work for a large technology company. The hours are demanding, the office politics are challenging, and it is the most stressful job I have ever had. However, I earn around 250,000 euros per year while living in Europe. Story 60. Data migration specialist for a healthcare merger. Earning over $150,000 with bonuses, but the experience was extremely challenging. I spent 70-hour weeks in an endless field of cubicles merging incompatible systems from the 1990s while doctors complained about missing patient records. The most difficult aspect was not the workload, but the understanding that people's lives were at stake if mistakes were made. I had to manually fix thousands of corrupted records while executives who could not distinguish a database from a spreadsheet demanded unrealistic outcomes. Meanwhile, consultants who earned twice my salary created flowcharts that nobody utilized. When I resigned, they offered an additional $50,000 to stay. I declined in favor of a position that paid 40% less but allowed me to avoid 3 a.m. calls about system outages and enabled me to sleep at night. While money is appealing, it is not worth sacrificing your sanity or health. No one regrets not spending more time fixing corrupted database entries for an impersonal healthcare corporation. Story 61. Working as a pharmaceutical sales representative offered great pay, but promoting unnecessary medications to doctors while being aware of the unethical practices of the pharmaceutical industry made me feel like a glorified con artist. I quit after 6 months despite receiving 6-figure paychecks. Story 62. Managing an Applebee's. It has become a joke to act poorly and start a fight at Applebee's. Surprisingly, a significant number of people actually do it. Story 63. Planting trees for the Forest Service involves strapping about 100 pounds of saplings to your waist and climbing up a mountain to plant them in specific patterns as part of a team. Another team member runs up and down the mountain, replenishing saplings so the others can continue planting. Because of the team patterns and the precise mix of tree types required, no one person can stop or slow down, or it disrupts the entire process. After 3 days, I felt exhausted. I was planting trees while feeling nauseous and battling muscle cramps. The next morning, I couldn't stand up straight. I thought I was strong until I took on this job, but I couldn't compare to the others. Paid very well, though. Story 64. Cleaning aquariums during college. All sizes and locations. I would probably be making more money now if I had stuck with it, but there is less fish waste and risk of electrocution in teaching. Story 65. I was a climber, helping to disassemble a massive scaffold structure outdoors in the July sun in the middle of a major city. I have never experienced such heat or such difficulty staying hydrated and unburned while trying to work quickly and fluidly with an unfamiliar team of others who had signed up for this challenging job. Story 66. Flat rate mechanics earn well when there is enough work, but during the slow season, there is little to no work, which causes financial strain. Additionally, the politics at a dealership can be challenging. I simply want to focus on repairing and maintaining vehicles. Story 67. My wife worked for a title loan company for a couple of years about a decade ago. Her friend told her it offered good income, and it did. She has had several jobs since then, but none of them could match her salary and bonuses from that job. However, she is not the type to be predatory, so she eventually quit because it was taking a toll on her well-being. Story 68. Installing insulation in crawl spaces and attics can be challenging. Even with long sleeves and protective clothing, it can still get on your skin. Showering afterward can make it itchier due to the steam opening your pores. Although the job paid well for labor, it only lasted 2 weeks. Story 69. My first software engineering job after college was at a demanding mid-sized company. Each of my coworkers was at the top of their class. We were instructed to ask for help only when absolutely necessary, because if a coworker spent 20 minutes assisting you with something you could have figured out yourself, you were costing the company money by wasting their time and having them do your job. Each assignment I received was completely new and could be impossible, yet I was given deadlines based on nothing and faced significant pushback if I didn't meet them. For 4 years, I managed to complete all my assignments while I saw many coworkers fired or quit. It never got easier. Eventually, I encountered a project that I couldn't complete on time and was told that was one strike, and I would be fired if it happened again. I was completely burned out at that point. I finished my next project, and then received another that I was sure I couldn't complete. I was prideful and young, so I didn't want to give my boss the opportunity to fire me. I informed my boss that I was quitting. He said that was fine and that he would probably have fired me in a few months anyway. Story 70. I made $14 an hour as a sign spinner in 2010. The owner was terrible, and the signs that you perform tricks with hurt when you mess up a trick. Story 71. I worked as a waitress at a restaurant. I received generous tips due to my appearance. However, the primary aspect of the job involved being objectified. Story 72. This was like high school, but in debt collecting. Paid twice as much as anywhere else. However, you were verbally torn apart every day. We were paid to track down these delinquent individuals by almost any means necessary. Story 73. My last job was in procurement, and it was challenging due to the excessive overtime. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week consistently, with too many customers and not enough employees. Although the overtime pay significantly increased my salary, I eventually became burnt out. By the time I left, I was prepared to take about 6 months off work without making any lifestyle changes. Story 74. My current job is in the same industry I have worked in for the past decade, so it is not a significant jump in skill. However, it is a third shift position with mandatory overtime every other week. The first issue is sleep. I have been here for 2 months now, and my body is refusing to adjust to the sleep change. It just knows it's daytime, and I can't stay asleep for longer than 2 hours at a time. There have been times when I got home from work, went to sleep, and then woke up 2 to 3 hours later without being able to go back to sleep. As a result, I am consuming large amounts of caffeine during work to stay awake. The second issue is my free time. Because I need to sleep during the day, I find it hard to do anything that does not involve trying to sleep. I have not spent any substantial amount of time doing anything other than sleeping or working since starting the job. I have not spent any meaningful time with my family. My oldest child is begging me not to leave at night, which is heartbreaking. However, due to the shift differential and mandatory overtime, my paycheck has never been higher. I left my previous job to escape a stagnant work environment, and I regret that decision daily. Now my current employer is starting to talk about hiring freezes, cost reduction, and promoting a cash flow first mindset. I have already experienced one corporate layoff, so I know that difficult times are ahead. It genuinely has not been worth it to me, and I am actively applying for any jobs that can get me out of my current situation. I even withdrew money from a previous retirement account early to pay off my car, reducing my monthly budget needs and justifying taking lower-paying jobs. I have genuinely never been more miserable in my life. Story 75. Nurse Manager. Supporting and helping nurses get what they need while pressuring them to do more with less due to the greed of the American healthcare system. It's a challenging situation. Story 76. Nuclear Reactor Operator. 98% of the job involves monitoring gauges and lines that rarely change. 2% of the job requires moving significant amounts of power while under the watchful eye of several colleagues. Story 77. Barista. I made good tips and the hourly wage was great, especially for 2019. However, I hated everything about the job. I disliked the customers, my coworkers, and eventually began to dislike coffee as well. Story 78. The company I work for in Germany is undergoing insolvency proceedings and is currently being managed by an insolvency administrator who is overseeing its operations. They are liquidating all assets. I remain on the payroll until the end of 2025. I feel unproductive as they keep me on standby in case they need my knowledge. I wanted to resign and had another job offer, but they offered me 200,000 euros to stay until the year ends. So I am at home all day, feeling bored. They call me about 3 times a week, or I have to visit the real estate properties they are trying to sell. Story 79. Pepsi Cola Bottling Company had a very toxic environment. In my 10th year, I could no longer handle it and resigned. Story 80. Casino Surveillance Manager. Pays well, but it is exhausting dealing with the incidents that occur. Between people having accidents, drugs, fights, thefts, leaving children in cars for hours, and even deaths, it is draining. Story 81. As a contracted dishwasher working at a local hospital for $24 per hour, I find it frustrating that even this amount is not a living wage in my area. Story 82. Rig Medic. I'm grateful that nothing ever happened during my shift, but 12 hours alone in a trailer with unreliable internet was challenging. Story 83. Probably my current job. I just got promoted to my company's executive leadership team. Now I have to do my regular job while also attending meetings for 80% of the day without a pay increase. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.